Have you ever felt like a moment was repeating itself? Perfectly. Like you knew exactly what was going to happen next before it even occurred. If so, you've probably experienced déjà vu, which literally translates from French to already seen. Déjà vu is a French term that has been adopted into English as part of our everyday vocabulary, and most of us have experienced this phenomenon at some point or another. You could be walking down the street and suddenly feel like you've walked this path before, as if the present moment is somehow a memory. Or maybe you're having a conversation with someone and they say something that you almost anticipate word for word. Regardless of how common it is, though déjà vu is still a relatively mysterious experience. So let's explore what actually causes déjà vu and why it feels so real. Déjà vu often occurs when we encounter something or experience a situation that seems to be very familiar to us. This can manifest in a few different ways. For example, you might see someone and feel like you know them, even though you're certain that you've never met them before. Or you might begin to speak and find yourself repeating a phrase that you've never uttered aloud before. Perhaps one of the most common scenarios in which déjà vu occurs is when we're simply doing something that we've done many times before. Imagine driving home from work. For example, since you do this commute every day, you know exactly what to expect, and you don't really need to pay attention to get where you're going. In these kinds of autopilot situations, déjà vu might kick in, and you might suddenly think, wait a second, am I just doing this again? In general, déjà vu is thought to affect about 2/3 of people. However, while most of us have experienced it, there's no single scenario that everyone experiences when it happens. Some people only experience it in certain circumstances, such as when reading or listening to music. Others might only experience it when visiting new places. But since déjà vu is so subjective, trying to study it scientifically is quite difficult. With that being said, scientists have come up with a few different theories to try and explain it. The most popular theory right now proposes that déjà vu is essentially a glitch in our memory processing system. According to this theory, déjà vu occurs when the brain processes a memory faster than we perceive something around us. So the part of the brain responsible for perception doesn't match up with the part of the brain responsible for recognizing what we're perceiving. Dr. Michael Schurdell, who studies memory at the University of London, illustrates this with the example of looking at a book. When you see the book, the visual signals go to the back of your brain to be processed. Meanwhile, the front part of your brain tries to figure out what the book is. This matching process usually takes about half a second, but according to Schrodel, sometimes the visual part of the brain processes the book faster than the recognition part does. So you end up knowing what it is before you've consciously registered seeing it. In other words, the feeling of familiarity arises before the conscious recognition does. And because our brains are so fast, the feeling happens almost instantaneously. So we don't even have time to think, hey, I think I've seen this before. The feeling just kind of registers, and then we continue on with our day. Another theory about déjà vu involves temporal lobe activity. In 1996, researchers had participants take a drug called methylphenidate, which is used to treat ADHD. They found that the drug reduced the occurrence of déjà vu in participants, suggesting that déjà vu may be linked to abnormalities in the temporal lobe of the brain, specifically the parahippocampal cortex and the adjacent retrosplenial cortex, which are involved in memory retrieval and spatial navigation, may play a role in déjà vu. Another finding that supports this theory is that some patients with epilepsy also report experiencing déjà vu more frequently. However, not everyone who experiences déjà vu has epilepsy or ADHD, and not everyone with these conditions experiences déjà vu. So it isn't clear whether déjà vu is a symptom of these disorders or whether these disorders make déjà vu more likely to occur. There's also an alternate theory that proposes déjà vu is not a glitch in the brain, but rather a glitch in the matrix. Not a real matrix? Sadly, but a metaphor for reality itself. This idea was proposed by psychologist David Fontana and is based on the belief that déjà vu is more than just a miscommunication between the brain's perception and cognition centers. Instead, Fontana believes that déjà vu suggests there's more to reality than meets the eye. He argues that déjà vu is actually a glimpse into an alternate version of reality, one that's just slightly different from ours. There isn't any evidence to support this idea. However, regardless of what causes it, déjà vu can feel incredibly strange and confusing. After all, it feels like you're living in a world that you've already lived in before. And although déjà vu is generally considered to be a harmless phenomenon, sometimes it can be a little unsettling. However, according to psychologists, it's typically not a sign of anything dangerous. Dr. Jason Braha, a cognitive neuroscientist at the University of California, says that déjà vu doesn't necessarily indicate a serious underlying issue. He likens it to when your phone auto-completes a word that you were about to type. It's basically your phone predicting what you're going to do next, and it's based on the fact that it knows everything you've ever typed before. In the same way, déjà vu occurs when your brain makes an accurate prediction about your future experience based on your past experiences. While déjà vu itself is not dangerous, though the feeling of familiarity that accompanies it can sometimes lead us to make bad decisions. This is because déjà vu can trick us into thinking that we've actually experienced a situation before, even if we haven't. A 2012 study found that people who reported experiencing déjà vu were more likely to trust unfamiliar faces and repeat mistakes. While this might not sound like a big deal, it could definitely be dangerous in certain situations. For example, if you're driving and suddenly feel like you've driven this route before, even though you haven't, you could end up in a ditch. Fortunately though, cases like this are probably pretty rare. Some people also believe that déjà vu is a sign of intuition, a gut feeling that something is right or wrong. However, there's no evidence to support this claim. Intuition is basically a feeling that you get when you're about to do something important, and it is felt to arise from your brain making subconscious connections between your current experience and past experiences. Déjà vu, on the other hand, is a feeling that you get when you're about to do something familiar. So although déjà vu and intuition both involve making connections between past and present experiences, they're technically different phenomena. So we still don't know exactly what causes déjà vu, but we do know that it can feel incredibly real. After all, when you have déjà vu, you're experiencing feelings of familiarity and recognition without being able to explain why. This is because when you recognize something, your brain releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine is associated with pleasure and reward, and it's released whenever you anticipate something good happening. So when you feel like you've experienced something before, your brain essentially tricks you into thinking that it's rewarding you by releasing dopamine, even though you're not actually getting a reward. The emotions associated with déjà vu are so real because your brain genuinely believes that you are about to receive a reward. According to psychologist John Sharp, your brain doesn't distinguish between real memories and fake ones. In the case of déjà vu, your brain can't tell the difference between the present moment and a memory of the past. So it responds to the fake situation just as it would to a real one. Déjà vu can feel especially real when you're under a lot of stress as well. This is because stress activates the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for processing emotions. So if you're already in an emotional state, déjà vu can be even more intense. Overall, déjà vu is a fascinating and somewhat mysterious experience. Although we still don't know exactly what causes it, we do know that it can feel incredibly real. So the next time you have déjà vu, just remember that your brain is playing tricks on you. But hey, at least it's not dangerous. Let us know your weirdest déjà vu experience below. Sometimes the brain remembers what never happened. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell for more insightful psychology videos. Thanks for watching.